Welcome to yet another video. Today we are going to discuss about the Spring Boot starter. Are you really tired of manually setting up the dependencies every time you are going to create the Spring Boot application? Have you ever felt overwhelmed by the number of dependencies and the configuration you require for the Spring Boot? What if the most frustrating thing that you have ever done when during the development that you wish you could have automated? If you are among one of them, this video is for you. You are on the right video. By end of this particular video, you will understand how you can make your development workflow and your Spring Boot application quite easy to maintain. Here you are not only going to understand what Spring Boot starter is about, but you are also ready to put that into the work and the level up your development. Okay, so stay back and watch the video till the end. So let's get started. Please stay back and watch till the end because we are going to showcase you all these particular points in couple of video. So what you will learn in this particular video is that we will discuss about the Spring Boot and its ecosystem. What is the need of this particular starter? We'll also look into the startup structure and the creation. We are going to look into the commonly used starters. What is the auto configuration in starter? Like how we can going to create a Spring Boot application, how we are going to add the dependencies, and what are the starter dependencies. What we'll look into this. Why and when we require custom starter. What is the advanced techniques we can using the Spring Boot starter. We can also troubleshoot some common issues. We'll also look into the best practice as well. So stay back and watch the video till the end. So the very first thing what we are going to discuss about this Spring Boot and its ecosystem. Now you must already be knowing Spring Boot is about making your Spring Boot development process quite easy and simplifying. So we are going to make use of the auto configuration. It is going to be simplifying your project setup and other details. So that's what the benefit of Spring Boot. Now, what is the benefit of our what are Spring Boot starter? Basically, it is a pre-configuration, ready to use dependencies that is going to include some common features and libraries for your specific set of dependencies or the use case whatever you require. So the role of starter dependency is not only accelerating your development, but it is also going to reduce your boilerplate configuration, which was too much time consuming when you're using the Spring, right? So that's the what exactly the Spring Boot starter is about. Now, what is the need of Spring Boot starter? Basically, there is a pain point like when you're dealing with a Spring Boot in a traditional Spring, that's traditional development. So there used to be a quite complex configuration which you need to do for the Spring application. Let's say you want to do some configuration of XML, and you need to add the property files, you need to do the manual dependencies, etc. Right? It was quite difficult in setting up some common features like database, web server, security, etc. Now there was a quite also a risk of common version conflicts, right? Versions we need to add up, we have to search, we have to check out your application is not starting properly or not. If it is not starting, then that there's a dependency problem or dependency mismanagement, right? So that we have to look out. So that was a common problem. That's what the reason, like we had the starter as a crucial thing. So it is going to encapsulate your required libraries into one feature in a one dependency. So it will make your development quite faster and the setup faster. It is more reliable, right? So it is going to give you a pre-configured things. It is going to integrate your Spring Boot auto configuration capabilities, and also it will reduce your manual setup. Now we'll look into the starter structure and the creation. Basically, when you look at the anatomy, right? We have a Maven or the Gradle project which we are going to use, and we add the Maven modules, right? So basically, we'll add the dependencies whatever required for the library for the functionality to work up. We're also going to have the conditional or auto configuration classes which will make use of the auto configuration annotation, which will automatically configure those particular things in your application. Now we have Spring.factories files, which is going to be located in the meta folder, which is going to register all your auto configuration classes. Now, when we look at the properties that Spring.factories, right? It is quite critical, and I'll tell you, like the auto configuration class is going to load that particular classes, right? That's where we'll make use of it. Now this is optional, but we can have property files, we have YML files, which will have some default configuration. So which will give you a startup point where you can have your own customization. Let's say you wanted to make some changes, right? So we can make use of it. So the default configuration will be already overridden. Now, what is the basic structure of that particular or the naming convention when you are wanted to add something as a Spring Boot starter, right? So always, the convention is like Spring Boot starter, and then the actual, let's say, web Spring Boot data JPA, Kafka or anything, right? So that's the convention. Now we'll look into, like, most commonly used Spring Boot starter. So basically, if you look at it, right, the Spring Boot configuration, like, let's say you want to develop any Spring Boot application with the REST capabilities, and you want to expose certain endpoints, right? We can make use of the web, right? So we doesn't need to manually, deploy that on the server. There is an inbuilt, embedded server like Tomcat and JT, which will make use of it. Now we can have the embedded configuration like Jackson, or we can have the Spring MVC to be enabled, right? So that we can use with the help of that. Now Spring Boot, the started data JPA. This is going to be for the database, like whether you're using JPA, Hibernate, etc. So it is going to automatically look into and configure that automatically, like the database and the other classes on a conditional basis. If you are using security related thing, all the Spring security related things will be added. You can have the authentication and the authorization capabilities and the configuration added, right? So we can override the configure method and we can define those all things. We have Thymali, which is going to be integrating with the template engine in the web application. Now we have this startup logger configuration as well, right? So like logback and then SLF4J, so we can make use of it. Auto configuration in the startup, so basically how we can actually auto configure it is going to it is going to automatically detect the libraries and the automated configuration feature which are there in the class path, right? So let's say you are adding JPA configuration for the data source, right? It is going to configure your data source, database, entity manager, factory, JPA transaction, beans, etc. So this will check for the auto configuration. Now Spring Boot actually is clever enough to determine the configuration which can be applied, right? So let's say you are using at the rate enable configuration, or in general if you are using at the rate Spring Boot application, which is a combination of all the three annotation, which will look at for the all the classes which are required. It'll check for the configuration files, it will check the class path, it will check the beans, it will get the at the rate configuration and the base packages and etc. It will load up, right? We have the Spring Boot Spring dot configuration property file also, that will be a starter jar which is going to list out all the configuration classes. We can also do the customization by using at the rate conditional on class, or at the rate condition on property and different annotation. So this gives you a more customized and the granular way of customizing it. Now we'll look into, like, how we can create a Spring Boot application. Let's jump into it. Want to create a Spring Boot application with the starter dependencies to be added. The first of all, we have to first land in this particular page. So this is one of the way. There are different ways to do it. You can also manually add the dependencies and then, but this is one of the easiest way to do it. Now you have to add the Maven project, and then we have to define the language. We have to look out for the Spring Boot exact version. So now one suggestion here is that never look out for the snapshot of the M2 or M1 version. Always look out for the specific version or the stable version which is going to be tested, which is already tested by the people, right? So it has been from the long time, there is no conflicts, there are no errors in that. You can actually make it will be make using of the production ready things, right? So if it's a stable version, that is quite good for you. Now we have also defined the group, artifact, and the name of the particular project. We have selected the packaging and then also the latest version of Java. On the right side, if you look at it, it is going to be a dependencies where we have added the web dependencies. We are going to add the security, right? So security we have just added, but normally we require, let's say you wanted to develop a REST API, right? It is just we can make use of the web dependencies and then we can develop that. Let's say you wanted to add the Spring Boot uh, uh, data JPA, right? So we can search it here and then we can add that data JPU, and also it will look at the configuration file and it automatically load it. Once you download this particular project, right, now you have to open that in one of your favorite IDE. It might be IntelliJ, it might be Eclipse, or any of your favorite IDE. Just open the pom.xml. If you look at it over here, you will see here that what is the version of it, right? So these are pom.xml. Now if you look at it, right, so what is the Spring parent version, what is the version of it, what are the starter dependencies, what are latest Java version, what is the dependencies we have added here. So security and web we have already added here, right? Now if you look in underneath this, there are again a transitive dependency. Now you can see there are some specific versions which are already configured here, right? So this is what called a transitive dependencies. This is how you can download and import, and then to make it use for the development, so you doesn't have to manually add those particular dependencies. I hope this was clear to you. Let's look at the other thing now, when and why we use a starter, which is going to be custom created. So basically, when you require some, say, reusable self-contained features, right, like custom logging setup, specific API integration, so in those case we use them. Now we can create the simple starter by bundling up in the common dependencies into a single jar file. Let's say you want to create some or integrate something with a third party library, we can make use of it. Now, how you can actually package this and make it available to share it for the custom starter? What we can do is that we can structure this particular starter with the Spring property, that factory file, auto configuration classes, and the documentation in that, and then we can publish this into a starter to one of the local, right, or the Maven repositories or the external repository. So there are some repositories where you can download. So when you develop any a Spring Boot application and include the pom.xml in the Maven, right, it is going to be deploy download that particular dependencies from the repositories, right, with the central location. Now, what is that advanced technique? We can make use of profile related specific configuration. Let's say we can make use of the application.yml or property file, so we can define some specific environment related thing, whether it is dev, production, or a staging. Like we can also make use of the profiles at the right profile, which can integrate your starter framework, right? Which is going to give you a customized, like what is your environment, whether dev, production, etc. Now we can have multiple combination of starters. We can have web, we can have Spring Data, JPA, security. So depend on your requirement whether you wanted to have a, let's say, microservices which is going to be not only secure but also it is making use of the database for database saving, right? So we have made to add the web dependencies, we have to add the Spring Boot data JPA, then we have to add the security. Let's say we are using MySQL, we can also add that. Let's say you are using event driven, we can use Kafka related, whenever we're developing a real world applications, right? So this is going to be easily managed that with the help of the multiple starter configuration. We can make use of this startup, this to we are going to integrate, let's say, the external libraries or the tools or the services in the Spring Boot application. So we can integrate the third party libraries inside. Now when we want to debug some auto configuration, we can make use of the actuator framework, which is help to monitor and debug your auto configuration. And we have bean, we have health checkups to be done, so that you can get to know what kind of beans or the application are getting loaded in, how the application is behaving as well. Now, how to troubleshoot is basically you have to check out for the dependencies conflict. So what you have to do is that we have to check for the version mismatch, what is the cause of it, how we can resolve it, right? So check out for the Maven or the Gradle dependencies, check out the tree and identify, and then we can resolve it. So basically, we could also have the particular auto configuration failures. So basically, it might be like we have, let's say your auto configuration is not working. So what we can do is that we can make use of the debug tool using the logs, or you can make use of the enable that particular Spring Boot debug using the hyphen debug flag, right? So we can identify what are the misconfiguration and then we can fix them. Now, what are the best practices? Definitely, we have to choose the right starter dependencies over there, so that you are choosing your dependencies or the starter dependencies what are specific to your use case and need. You should always avoid overloading the unnecessary starter. So if you are requiring web that doesn't include it's a simple API, right? You doesn't include database required, that they don't add that. As simple as that. There is always going to be a version compatibility check. You have to always ensure that all the starter dependencies are compatible with each other. There are, especially when you are upgrading your let's say the major versions, let's say the 2 to 3, the Spring Boot from 2 to 3 or 3 to 4, like let's say the future version. You have to always look out for the versions, right? So you have to take the advantage of, let's say the framework of actuator, where you can monitor, troubleshoot your beans, how your application is behaving. I hope this video was quite helpful to you, and also it gave you an insight of what Strutter framework is about. Also, this video will be quite helpful for the people who are attending interviews, right? Because this will give an in-depth knowledge about Spring Boot Starter, right? If this video was helpful, please share it with the needy people. Also, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the bell icon. Thank you.